Okay, I guess we can go ahead and get started, and if there's more people to come in, I'll just let them in as they come. So, hi everybody, I'm Angie Viscianen, and I am the CEO and founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program to connect prospective law students to lawyers for mentoring. We started doing these free weekly meetups during the COVID-19 pandemic so that you guys can get some information about what to do right now while you're applying to law school and help you cope and meet some other folks that are going through the same thing as you. So feel free to put your video on. This is not one of those sessions that I want to just talk at you guys the whole time. We would love to actually see you and interact with you. So feel free to put your video on. Today we have a very special guest. We have Steve Schwartz from the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and blog. And podcast, right? And he's here to talk to us about the LSAT Flex. We're going to start off with, basically just a quick back and forth between me and Steve. I'm going to ask him some questions about the LSAT Flex, and then after that, we'll just open it up for open Q&A, and anyone can chime in and ask your questions. Feel free to also type your questions in the chat box, and we can, address those at the end as well. So just a reminder, these sessions are recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, just shut off your video and don't participate. But if you don't mind, then feel free to unmute yourself and jump in and ask questions. So Steve, I'll let you take it away. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Angie. Pleasure to connect with you once again. Nice to see everyone here. Lots of recent changes, of course, in the LSAT world. The biggest I've seen in my 15 years of teaching the LSAT with the LSAT blog, running that, hosting the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. I've put links to several of my resources in the chat so folks can check them out if they're looking for more aside from the YouTube channel and the podcast and the blog. I've also got an Instagram, a Facebook community, many other resources, along with, of course, guides, cheat sheets, checklists, full courses and such. And the biggest thing I'm focusing on lately is, of course, the new online LSAT Flex that LSAC just announced a couple of weeks ago. So I thought that might be a good topic for discussion.
Yeah, it's the Wild West out there, man. First, the LSAT goes digital, and now they're offering an in-home version. Oh my goodness. So can you tell us a little bit, what are the key differences between the LSAT Flex and the LSAT?
Well, so the biggest thing is that the LSAT Flex, of course, you're doing it at home on your own computer, whereas the previous digital LSAT was at a testing center and 5 sections, not 3. So the biggest thing folks studying should be aware of is that LSAT Flex is 3 sections. Old LSAT was 5 sections, 4 scored, plus 1 experimental section. So big change there.
Yeah, so much shorter exam, right?
Much shorter.
And then, and the format of it, you can take it at home. Do you download some software onto your computer? Do you need like a tablet, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you specifically need a computer that runs either Microsoft Windows or a Mac OS. So a tablet isn't going to work. A smartphone certainly isn't going to work. And you're using software from a company called ProctorU that handles at-home testing for a variety of tests, not only the LSAT, but also the GRE, the GMAT, high school advanced placement exams as well. For security, they monitor you with a webcam and a microphone to make sure it's really you doing it. They track your eye movements. It's crazy, but that's what they've got to do to ensure it's really you taking it.
Okay, so Proctor watches you for the entire 3 hours?
Yeah, but the good news is that it's actually only 2 hours because it's only 3 sections. So
right.
You're done after 2 hours. And so assuming that you have a good home environment and a good internet connection, it's a pretty smooth experience and much more comfortable, I would imagine, than doing it in person where there's physical proctors walking around, other test takers. And of course, previously, if they were sniffling or coughing, you would just be annoyed. Now you're going to be worried you're going to catch something. So definitely better to be able to do it at home.
Oh yeah, I remember taking the LSAT in person, and it was like we had, paper thin walls. There was ambulances going on outside. It was like loud as heck. So I'm sure it's much better now. So what should students be doing differently to prepare for the LSAT Flex as opposed to your regular LSAT? Is there anything that you would suggest they do different?
Yeah, a couple of big changes. And I should just preface this by saying that the content of the exam has not changed at all. So any materials you've been using previously that talk about logic games, logical reasoning, reading comprehension, all of that remains the same. What mainly changes is is how you simulate test day. So instead of thinking about taking the exam in a coffee shop, as I would have recommended before, to simulate some ambient noise and distractions, obviously you can't do that now anyway, nor do you need to. Instead, take it at the same desk in the same room with the same computer. You'll do the actual thing. The other thing is 3 sections, not 5. So you're not doing an experimental section, and you're also not doing 2 logical reasoning sections. Now with LSAT Flex, you're doing only 1 logical reasoning section along with 1 games and 1 reading comp. So 3 sections back to back, 1 of each. You're done in 2 hours. Also, and we'll talk, I know this was a question you had in mind as well regarding the weighting of different sections. So the old InPerson LSAT had 4 scored sections, including 2 logical reasonings. Now you have only 1 logical reasoning section, and LSAC has confirmed that all questions will be weighted equally, meaning that logical reasoning is no longer half the exam and half of your score. It's now only approximately 1/3 of your score. And so before I would have said, do a lot of prep on logical reasoning because any gains you make there are automatically doubled because there's 2 sections of it. Now, each section is roughly the same, being 1/3. So logical reasoning has diminished in importance a little bit, and games and reading comp have increased in importance a little bit. So you might want to adjust your ratio of prep accordingly.
Okay, but does it impact the scoring? Are they still using the same scale, 180?
Yeah, the scale is still on 120 to 180, and LSAT Flex scores are considered equivalent by admissions, just like the regular in-person LSAT. So don't worry that if you do better on LSAT Flex, admissions will say, well, that was the Flex, it wasn't the real one. They have all confirmed. I've reached out to several of them personally, and LSAC has also had admissions officers on their webinars talking about how they'll look at it the same, not as any less. So don't worry if you're doing the Flex and not the regular.
Yeah, so do you think that they're going to offer LSAT Flex as an option for the future test dates after May? Or because right now, if you were signed up to take the April, you were automatically pushed to May, right? And it's closed registration for LSAT Flex right now. So do you think that they'll be offering it in the future if all this continues?
I do. If COVID-19 continues where people are sheltering in place, staying at home, then they'll have no choice but to continue offering the LSAT Flex. And most immediately, we'll see that if and when the June 8th LSAT is canceled, which I highly expect it will be, considering that Virginia, for example, has stay-at-home order until June 10th. So June 8th LSAT can't go forward. I expect they will cancel that administration and reschedule it as an LSAT Flex sometime in the following month. As for July, August, October, nobody can really say for certain. I think the shorter term, closer exam dates are, of course, relatively more likely to be canceled. But I also hear talk of potential second waves of COVID-19. And so I think it's possible that any LSAT scheduled in the near future, even within the next year, has a decent chance of being an LSAT Flex. And then for the long term, I think it just offers so many logistical benefits that once LSAC learns how to administer this and works out all the kinks logistically, I think it could definitely be the future. I think it's hard to go backwards on technology. And there were so many downsides to doing it in person, like booking a test center. Test centers get booked up. You then have to travel for it also.
Yeah, really far for a test center.
Yeah, people would have to take flights for it. People would have to travel internationally sometimes to do it. And they'd be stressing over not getting one conveniently located. They'd book hotel rooms just to drive 3 hours away. And this removes all of that. And also people can choose times that work for them. So you could choose morning or afternoon, maybe even evening slots. And we'll find out more about that very soon, about what exact times you could do it. But I would imagine they'll have a variety of options.
Yeah. So do you think there's any reason, though, to be taking the LSAT Flex now? Do you suggest that people go ahead and register for the test knowing that they'll probably get pushed to do LSAT Flex? Or do you think that they should just wait and go back, whenever all this is subsided?
I would say overall, take it when you're ready, regardless of Flex or regular. I think Flex offers a number of advantages for convenience, again, and just more pleasant. 2 hours at home versus 3 hours or more at a testing center. The caveat would be if logical reasoning is your strong suit by far, the regular LSAT weights that a little bit more heavily. So if you're not that great at games and reading comp, but logical reasoning you do really well, that's definitely a clear indication regular LSAT might be better for you. But if you're roughly equal in all sections, or you don't really care that much about one versus the other, then I would say do whatever works better for you. And if you want LSAT Flex, as we said, the May one is closed. That was just for people who were registered for April. But if you want to do LSAT Flex and you think you'll be ready by mid to late June, I would register for the June 8th LSAT because, like I said, that'll probably be canceled and rescheduled as a flex.
And how do you think that all these push dates are going to impact law school admissions for this next coming cycle? Do you think it's going to have a really significant impact?
I think that just due to COVID-19 in general, a lot of folks are not looking to start law school this fall.
Yeah.
They're deciding more to wait until the next cycle to
Yeah.
apply. And so we may see that next cycle is a little bit more competitive than the current cycle finishing up now.
Yeah.
And as for the cycle that's currently going on, law schools are extending deadlines to wait for the results of the May LSAT Flex. Obviously, not every single school will. There's over 200 ABA accredited law
Sure.
schools, but most of them do want to wait for these applicants, and they need applicants. They don't need to enforce these deadlines. They can remove them or extend them as the situation warrants.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of schools extending their deadlines and even extending seat deposit deadlines and everything else. It's like whatever that you can do to make sure there's still people coming, they're doing.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So I saw we also have a question in the chat box from Maya. She asked, do you know how LSAC will address unexpected tech issues for LSAT Flex?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a concern. So, like I said, if you have a home environment that's not suitable, like your roommates, your family, significant other, pets interrupting you, causing noise, then of course you want to book the LSAT Flex at a time that none of that will happen. And that could even include things like other people streaming videos or being on video calls. Because the more video you have that's taxing your internet connection, the more likely it is that you could have an issue. So, do it at a time when that will be at a minimum, or you can get others to agree to keep that to a minimum. And if your internet cuts out briefly for a couple seconds or a minute, your work gets saved by ProctorU, the company that administers this, and you'll pick up where you left off. If it's a larger outage, then that could maybe compromise the integrity of the exam from a security perspective, and they might have to reschedule it. So if your internet is just bad and you can't fix it no matter what, reach out to LSAC. Same goes for if you don't have a suitable device, like if you don't have a good laptop to do this on, reach out. They could provide you with a loaner. And if your internet's bad, they might even set you up with an in-person administration, obviously small group or maybe even private at a local university or law school to help you ensure that you're able to take it in the end.
Awesome. All right. Well, I mean, that's pretty much all the questions that I had. Is there anything else that you think that the students should know in preparation for taking it?
I think we've hit all the major points. One thing I do want to add, though, is that I know obviously it's stressful to be the first cohort going through a new change. And over the course of my career, I have seen a lot of changes with the LSAT. And like I've seen them add the dual comparative passages in June 2007. They added rule substitution questions in June 2009. They switched from one-page layout to two-page layout for logic games in June 2012. And now, of course, last year, the LSAT went digital. So there have been all these changes. And each time students were up in arms, it was very stressful to be going through that. And the one constant I've seen is that all your materials are still perfectly relevant with very small adaptations. Everything you've been studying up to this point will still be useful. It will still apply. The weighting of certain sections could change and the format could change, but the content largely remains the same. And I'm, of course, staying on top of all these changes, adapting my resources appropriately. I completely revamped my courses last year for the digital LSAT. I'm doing the same for the LSAT Flex because I do have the expectation that long-term it will be LSAT Flex whether there's COVID-19 or not. And so I'm constantly thinking about, especially over the past 2 weeks since they announced this, how to adjust your simulation of test day accordingly to account for this. And so we're
Yeah, I've
talking
been
about all
telling my
this now.
mentees,
Yeah.
like, hey, don't ignore the fact that, you know, the LSAT Flex is around just because you think it's going to be for one or two administrations. Like, it could potentially be the long-term solution. So I'm telling everybody to just kind of keep up with it and make sure that they understand, you know, what's the format of the test like, how should you be preparing, all of that. So this has been super, super helpful. I'd like to just open it up now. If anybody has questions for Steve or for me, feel free to just unmute yourself, chime in, and ask away. No?
One thing I could add is that if you don't know whether you're going to do the in-person or the flex, be ready for both, meaning do some
Yeah.
3-section exams as well as some 5-section exams. It never hurts to overtrain as long as you don't burn out. So if you prepare for 5 sections and only have to do 3, that's great. You trained for a full marathon, you only ended up having to run a half marathon.
Yeah.
And so not a huge downside there. Just do your 3 sections back to back, take a break, then do 2 more. Your first 3 sections are your LSAT Flex score, and your following 2 sections, when combined with that, become your 5-section regular in-person LSAT experience. And so you can simulate either way and see what your results would have been in either case.
Yeah, for sure. I think I saw somebody unmute themselves. Tiffany, did you have a question?
I do. Thank you all for hosting this webinar. I really
Yeah.
appreciate the information. I had a question about whether or not LSAC would provide your LSAT score the day of the test on May 18th or 19th. I recall hearing them say that during the webinar that they had earlier this month. I'm not sure if you guys heard that also or have any
that you
information
get to
on
see your
that.
score
I know that
immediately?
that's what I thought I heard, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're not able to see your score immediately. I've asked LSAC several times if they could roll that out or at least give you a raw score or at least give you an estimated provisional score subject to change, but they're still making you wait. The good news is that for the in-person LSAT, you used to have to wait 3 weeks. Now for the online LSAT, you only have to wait 2 weeks, at least for the May LSAT Flex. They're saying that they'll get you scores no later than Friday, June 5th. And I'm hoping with time, they'll continue to release them sooner and sooner. They've always been able to, they really go overboard with their number crunching and getting everything loaded up into their system to email tens of thousands of people, but they should do it faster. And I hope they will with time.
Sure. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. See, we also got a question from Maya on the score conversion.
Yep.
Converting a 3-section score to 1 out of 120 to 180. That's a great question. Unfortunately, LSAC has not released a raw score conversion chart for the LSAT Flex because we'd all love to know how many do you need to get right to get a 160 or to get a 170, and they haven't released any information on this. I've asked them for some guidance. In the meantime, I've got a couple of rough approximation techniques you could use. One of them would be to simply take your raw score on a given prep test and multiply it by 4/3 to switch from 3 scored sections to 4 scored sections. That would not be a perfect approximation, but it would give you a rough idea. So let's say you did 3 sections and approximately 75 questions, you got about 50 correct. You then multiply that by 4/3 and check that result against your raw score conversion chart for that given prep test. That's probably the simplest way for most people. The other way you could do it would be to calculate your accuracy percentage on the 3 sections you do, and then look at the total number of questions on that exam to see what that percentage would have been applied to a specific raw score, and then convert it. Not perfect, but gives you a rough idea.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think about this score conversion because, I mean, isn't one of the main reasons why logical reasoning is tested twice on the real exam because they contend that there's such a huge correlation between logical reasoning and your performance in law school. It's really interesting to me to see, how are they going to justify that going forward? If apparently the LSAT Flex is supposed to be just taken the same as the normal LSAT. How are they going to justify that, the test format that way? I don't know.
That's a good question. I thought the same. So if logical reasoning doesn't need to be half the exam, it could only be about 1/3. Why haven't they always done it that way?
Right.
And actually back in the late 1980s, they actually had the LSAT as a 3-section exam with all sections weighed roughly equally. And so I think they're just saying we've done this before. It was good enough. We're doing it again out of necessity. Maybe making logical reasoning be half the scored questions has a slightly higher correlation with first-year law school grades, which is what the LSAT is intended to do. But making it only approximately 1/3 is still good enough, or at least the best they can do given the circumstances. And if anybody's wondering why they reduced it to 3 sections rather than 5 for the online, it's because of bathroom breaks. If you have to leave the room, that becomes a security issue. So that's the situation. That's all.
Yeah,
That's
I
the best they
mean,
could do.
I always thought the LSAT was kind of a test of mental fitness because you're just worn down. Like that's the hardest part is staying fresh for 5 sections, I mean, and it was always, that was the hardest part was just, making sure that like you're not totally wiped by the end of the test. So it's strange now that they're like, oh yeah, we're going to throw all that out the window. Now we're going to chop it to 2 hours and, it'll be just as good. We promise.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, but you make a good point though, that endurance is actually a little bit less important than it used to be. And being warmed up and ready to go the second you hit start becomes even more important. And I've always recommended doing a few warm-up questions before you start your exam. Now, I think that's more important than ever before because each question is worth a little bit more than in the past.
Yeah. But by a few warm-up sections or questions, you mean don't go through like an entire section?
No, not a whole section. Just maybe a game you've done before, a reading comp passage you've done before, a couple of logical reasoning questions. I would say that's enough.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Well, in case they do have any follow-up questions for you, Steve, did you drop any information in here for them to contact you?
Yeah, I shared tons of different links to all my resources, and I'll just give my email address as well.
Okay.
So folks can feel free to email me directly as well with any follow-ups. I've also got a playlist specifically on the LSAT Flex on my YouTube channel. Just
Perfect.
go to bit.ly/LSAT Flex. And I've got tons of videos there. I'm adding more every day on all the latest changes. I did a class last night that was up to date with all the information at the time. No new information from LSAC since then, so check that one out.
But it seems to be changing, by the minute.
Yeah, last week they did a webinar. The week before they also did a webinar. They haven't announced one for this week yet regarding LSAT Flex at least. But if they release more information via email or in a webinar, of course, I will do more videos on that and announce more through all my social media channels, mainly Facebook and Instagram, aside from YouTube and the podcast.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Oh, actually, I think we have a latecomer who's joining us. So, hi, Esmeralda. We were just wrapping up, but if you had any questions that you wanted to ask Steve, feel free to jump in and ask them now. Otherwise, we were just going to wrap up. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Thank you guys for being here. So I just wanted to ask, like, because I'm getting started to like prepare for the LSAT, and I know like something that I'm kind of worried about is being able to pay for any prep courses. So I don't know if you have any recommendations towards like how I can look for like scholarships or the waiver. Like I've heard of a lot of different things you can do to help be able to afford to like get ready for it and stuff. I don't know if you have any recommendations.
Yeah, sure. I've got a few ideas on that. So first of all, apply for an LSAC fee waiver. If you get a fee waiver, a lot of companies will give you full access to their course or give you a scholarship for their course, either partial or full. I give a scholarship on my courses for anyone who has an LSAT fee waiver. So feel free to just email me the fee waiver and I'll give you the scholarship. I give a 50% scholarship on any of my courses if you have a fee waiver. You can also get official LSAT Prep Plus from LSAC with your fee waiver, which gives you access to the vast majority of released exams in the digital LSAT format. And of course, I also have a free LSAT course as well that I linked in the chat, open to anybody. And then there's also Khan Academy, which is a great source, at the very least, for more exams in the digital format.
Awesome. And then this fee waiver, it's on the website, right? The LSAC website.
Yeah, so there's forms you can fill out there, and they don't approve everybody, but it's based on tax returns and such. And if you get denied, you can always appeal it and potentially get.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All righty. Oh, I have another person who just came in. Okay. Hi, Deborah. We were just wrapping up. We finished the Q&A portion, but if you have a question that you want to jump in and ask Steve, feel free to ask now, or you can also, he's included his email in the chat box, and you can email him afterwards as well. Does anybody else have any quick questions before we wrap up? Okay, well, I'll be sending out an email to everybody who was on this webinar afterwards with the information that Steve provided. So if you guys have any follow-up questions for him, feel free to contact him and check out all of his materials. He's got some great free resources and study guides. So, and I hope you all have a happy, safe, and healthy week. We're having another webinar on Thursday with Anna Ivy. She's a former law school admissions representative, and she runs her own consulting company to help students who are trying to apply to law school with their applications. So if you want to join us for that meetup, we'll see you then.